at the last election. The CPS has decided in all but one case that there will be no charges, no one will be prosecuted, because although it said that the spending returns may have been inaccurate, there was insufficient evidence at the last election. The CPS has decided anyone had acted dishonestly. They had been told, the agents have been told by no one will be prosecuted, because although it said that the returns, that this spending was part of the national campaign.
All right, Danny, thank you very much indeed. Danny Shaw reporting. Some of the other stories making BBC News at 5 this evening. And a man arrested near Downing Street nearly 2 weeks ago has appeared before magistrates accused of preparing terrorist acts. 27-year-old Khalid Mohammed Omar Ali is also charged with making or having explosives. He was remanded in custody and will appear at the Old Bailey later on this month. Manchester University says it's planning to cut up to 171 mainly academic jobs to make cost savings and to ensure its financial sustainability. The university and college union said there was no economic rationale for cuts on such an enormous scale. 3 women who were arrested as part of an investigation by the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command have been released, while another 3 women remain in custody. The arrests were made after a raid in April by armed police in northwest London, which resulted in 1 woman being shot. The family of 11-year-old Eva Janet, who died yesterday after falling from a water ride at a theme park, say their world has been torn apart. A safety investigation is underway at Drayton Manor in Staffordshire, which remained closed today as a mark of respect. Her school, the Jamia Girls Academy in Leicester, was also closed today. Our correspondent Phil Mackey has this report.
Eva Janet had come to the park on a school trip. The emergency services arrived quickly. Staff and paramedics tried to save her, but she was pronounced dead after being airlifted to hospital. Today, investigators are examining the Splash Canyon ride and are trying to work out how she fell into the water. There is a height restriction, which means that young children who are between 3 and 3.5 feet tall have to be accompanied by an adult. Although people aren't strapped in, they are told to remain seated. 4 years ago, another young boy, Patrick Tracy, fell into the water on the same ride.
One hand was still holding onto the bar, and he was half stood to wave, and at that point the boat sort of bumped against the edges of the rapids and he just was tossed headfirst into the water. I panicked and I didn't know what to do, but luckily there was a member of the public, a lovely lady next to me, that just said, "Hold on, I've got him," and jumped over this fence that we were leaning on. She jumped over a second fence and dragged Patrick out of the water.
Drayton Manor says it's checking through its records and liaising with the Health and Safety Executive. Eva's school is shut today. Staff and pupils have been offered counselling.
She was a lovely, sweet-natured girl, and she was loved by everyone at the school. As a school and as a community, we are trying to make sense of this terrible tragedy. Our thoughts and our prayers are with Eva's family at this most difficult time.
Everybody's in shock. Everybody's in utter shock. There's no words. I mean, myself, I couldn't sleep last night thinking of this. You know, I've got kids that probably will be in the future going to a trip like this. I probably wouldn't tell my children.
The park is shut today as a mark of respect. No decision has been made on when it will reopen.
That was Phil Mackey reporting. This is BBC News at 5, our latest headlines. President Trump has defended his decision to sack the head of the FBI without warning. He says that James Comey was not doing a good job. The family of Eva Janet, the 11-year-old girl who died at a theme park yesterday, say their world has been torn apart. The Crown Prosecution Service says no Conservatives will face charges over claims they had breached the rules on campaign spending during the last general election.
And in sports, England coach Eddie Jones is expecting a highly competitive Rugby World Cup group after being drawn alongside France and Argentina for the tournament in 2019, but he insists it isn't a group of death. Ireland and Scotland have been drawn together as well. They'll also face the host Japan, with Wales in the same group as Australia. And as Paul Pogba returns to training and FIFA announced they intend to investigate the midfielder's world record transfer to Manchester United, one EFL club chairman calls some of the figures associated with the deal outrageous. And I brought on those stories just after 5:30.
Billions of pounds invested in schools. That's what both Labour and the Liberal Democrats are promising if they win the general election. Labour says it would plough £5 billion more into schools in England annually by 2022. The Liberal Democrats say they would invest an extra £7 billion across the UK over a period of 4 years. Here's our political correspondent, Leila Nathu, who's been looking at both their plans.
It's an issue that's galvanised parents and teachers across England. Now school funding is firmly on the election agenda. Labour is pledging to transform an education system it says has been starved of money.
Every child, whatever their background, will be given the opportunity to unlock their full potential. We will give further and technical education the parity of esteem that it deserves, not just with warm words, but with bold action.
Labour are promising to create a national education service. The party says by 2022, schools in England will get a £4.8 billion annual boost, and no school will be worse off from plans to change the way money is allocated between them. Education maintenance allowance for college students and university grants would both be reintroduced, and adults would be able to retrain for free.
If I put maybe a quarter of a cup in.
Pouring more money into the mix is also the Liberal Democrats' plan. £6 billion for schools in England spread over 4 years and extra for the devolved administrations.
2/3 of schools, it now turns out today, are planning to lay off at least one teacher and lose at least one teaching post in the next 2 months. Under that kind of pressure, there needs to be a response, a fully costed response, to build a future for all of our children so that we can have decent education and be confident in that.
Big plans, though, come with big bills. Both parties say they would reverse cuts to corporation tax to fund schools. Labour says the rate would rise from 19% to 26% by 2020.
The Labour Party proposals would certainly raise more than enough from corporation tax to pay for these increases in school funding. But of course, an increase in corporation tax has significant economic effects. It will reduce investment by companies in the UK, and in the long run, it won't raise as much as it might in the short run as companies change their behaviour.
Head teachers have protested that they're facing the biggest squeeze on school budgets for decades and say it will mean cuts to subjects and bigger class sizes. The Conservatives say schools have received record levels of funding and warn the opposition parties can't deliver on their promises.
Over the last 7 years, we've protected the core schools budget in real terms. We are spending record amounts in our schools, £41 billion this year, and there are 1.8 million more pupils in good and outstanding schools today than there were in 2010.
The government's plans to open new grammar and free schools and change the formula used to calculate school funding have both proved controversial. It's given the opposition parties ammunition to take their electoral battle to the classroom. Leila Nathu, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's get the very latest from our correspondents on the campaign trail. Alex Forsyth's been following the Conservative campaign in Nottinghamshire today, and Danny Savage has been with Labour in York. Let's go first to Alex.
Yeah, that's right. Theresa May in Nottinghamshire to 2 Labour-held seats, which gives you an idea of exactly the vote that she's going after. Her first visit was a fairly controlled affair. She met Conservative candidates and activists, and then she came here to this marketing firm. And here she took questions from staff. They were unscripted and unvetted. This is a fairly new development in Theresa May's campaigning technique because there were a whole range of topics. She was asked about homelessness, about food banks, about the NHS, about education. Among other things, she said tuition fees for university students are here to stay. She defended her plan to introduce more grammar schools, saying people would not be selected on the basis of their economic background. She was even asked about veganism, to which the Prime Minister said it's a matter of personal choice, but she made clear she does eat meat. There was no huge policy announcement today. This was again about Theresa May trying to define herself as the stable leader that the country needs and drawing parallels with Labour and with Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour leader has been out today too, and my colleague Danny Savage has been following him in Yorkshire.
Well, we're in St Helens Square, right in the heart of the city of York, and if you were here an hour or so ago, it was quite a scene. About 2,000 Labour supporters had packed into this square to see Jeremy Corbyn and listen to him making a stump speech in this city. Various things were mentioned throughout, to ecstatic cheers from Labour supporters who were chanting his name at times. It was a real feel of an American-style election rally here. Our events are outdoors, he said, open air, and anybody can come. A clear dig at Theresa May not doing enough public stump speeches, in his opinion. So that drew a big cheer as well. Fox hunting was mentioned too. We were the party that banned it. That's come back onto the agenda in the last couple of days. People are talking about what will happen with fox hunting. Again, big cheers in support of keeping that ban on fox hunting from the crowd here in North Yorkshire this afternoon. Lots of local comments. He was, of course, here to support his local MP, Rachel Maskell. There was talk about York's chocolate legacy because, of course, this is a city that is facing some job cuts that Nestlé announced in the last few weeks, which could happen in the coming months. In other speeches today, Jeremy Corbyn was at a further education college in Leeds talking about the education policy we heard a few minutes ago. One thing he mentioned, the advantage of a short parliament, he said, because we've only had 2 years since the last general election, the advantage of a short parliament is that it gets us round the cabinet table a lot quicker. Fighting talk from Jeremy Corbyn in Yorkshire today, and judging by the 2,000 people or so in this square earlier on, a lot of support for him here locally. They cheered him in and they cheered him out again, Ben.
All right, Danny, thank you. And also we can bring you the latest on the Liberal Democrats and the SNP. Seema Katechas following the Lib Dems in Cardiff for us today. And Katrina Renton has the latest from the SNP campaign in Glasgow. So let's go first to Seema there.
Well, it's a glorious day here in Cardiff. The Liberal Democrats and Tim Farron will be campaigning here tomorrow, but they started off this morning in the north of Cornwall, in a town with a primary school. The leader went in, spoke to some children, spoke to the teachers about the policy that he's been talking about if he were elected as Prime Minister. He says he would be investing £7 billion into schools and colleges, and that money would come from a 20% rise in corporation tax. However, he was meted by some constituents who were rather annoyed with his presence in the north of Cornwall. Remember, this constituency voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU, and as he was getting back on his battle bus to leave the constituency, a man said to him, "Hang on a minute, Mr. Farron, why are you here banging on about staying in the single market when we here voted to leave the EU?" Now, Tim Farron said to him, "Well, hang on a minute, I am trying to get the best deal." And he also made a point that he feels very strongly about, and which we've heard over the last couple of days where he's been talking to other constituents. He said, "Look, I'm mingling with the public. I'm getting in there and speaking to people, and you would not be having this conversation up close with any of the other leaders." Now, the children we spoke to, they say they were very taken away with him. Some of them said he was very kind. He spoke to them about human rights. He spoke to them about policing. But he'll be speaking a bit more about some of the issues that matter most to him here in Cardiff tomorrow. Now, Katrina Renton has the latest on the SNP from Glasgow.
Well, that's right. The First Minister, the leader of the SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, she hit the campaign trail just north of Glasgow in the constituency of Easton Bartonshire. Now, it was one of the massive gains that the SNP made last time around, but the Liberal Democrats want it back, so it's a key battleground. And Nicola Sturgeon was here today trying to shore up her party's support there. And she chose a pie shop for her first photo opportunity of the day, giving her supporters plenty of chance to comment that the SNP had the right recipe for success in these elections. And it's no surprise that she chose Easton Bartonshire as the place to come to talk about pensions and her support for pensioners' income. Now, she reaffirmed the SNP's commitment to the triple lock, that it will rise by either inflation, average earnings, or 2.5%, whatever's highest. Now, why did she choose Eastern Bartonshire for that? Well, higher than average number of people living there are at or reaching pension age. Now, she also took the opportunity to address the fact that no Conservatives face any charges for breach of election expenses in 2015. Now, she said that the Conservatives still have very significant questions to answer, and this could be the right time to give the Electoral Commission some more clout. Ben.
All right, many thanks, Katrina, and our thanks to all our correspondents out and about on the general election trail for us this evening. Alex Forsyth, Danny Savage, Seema Katecha and Katrina Renton. And just a reminder, you can keep up to date with all the latest developments throughout the campaign and all the live events too on our BBC News website. That's at bbc.co.uk/news. And if you're on the move, just follow the election via the BBC News app. FIFA are investigating the transfer of Paul Pogba to Manchester United. He was the world's most expensive player when he moved from Juventus last summer. Now, FIFA want to know who was involved in the £89.3 million deal and exactly how much money they earned out of it. United say FIFA have all the necessary documents from last August. Let's talk about this to our sports correspondent, Katie Gornall, who's at Old Trafford for us this evening. And the allegation is that Pogba's agent just made an absolute fortune out of this deal.
Well, that's right, Ben, and this all stems from a book that is due to be published in Germany, but has made claims that have been widely reported in the media around the world. And the central claim is that it has a breakdown of this £89 million world record transfer of Paul Pogba from Juventus to Manchester United in the summer, and it claims that Pogba's agent, Mino Raiola, received £41 million as part of this transfer. There's a further allegation in this book which says that that may in some way breach third-party ownership rules, FIFA's rules on that. But at the moment, there's no suggestion that anyone's done anything wrong. FIFA say this isn't a formal a formal investigation, but they are wanting a bit more detail on it. They've written to Manchester United to seek clarification. They want to know exactly who was involved in this deal to bring Pogba to Old Trafford, and they want to know how much money was paid to them. As I say, no suggestion from them that anyone's done anything wrong, but clearly, Ben, a lot of questions swirling around about this particular transfer.
Yeah, and I suppose it reflects wider concerns in the world of football that agents are just too powerful, too rich, and that they agitate to move their players just so they can make more money.
Well, yes, and that is one of the issues I think that people will be looking at when this further information about this comes out. But Mino Raiola, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing against the regulations for him to be paid money as part of this deal. It's the allegation that this was a sizable fee that has caused further scrutiny, I think, in this case. But Paul Pogba isn't the only one of his clients to be here at Old Trafford. He also represents Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Henrik Mkhitaryan. Now, the BBC did contact Raiola for his comments on this. He declined to comment, but he did say the matter was in the hands of his lawyers. As for Manchester United, they seem relatively unconcerned about all of this. They released that statement that you mentioned, saying that they don't comment on specific transfers, but they did say that all the relevant documents have been with FIFA since August, when this transfer was completed. Now, there is a press conference due to take place very soon, actually, with Jose Mourinho. He may well be asked about this particular transfer, but I think he's unlikely to be drawn into it, with Manchester United having such a big game on the horizon. They play Celta Vigo in the second leg of their Europa League semi-final here tomorrow night.
All right, Katie, many thanks indeed. And just to say, we're going to have more on that story in the next half an hour, including some industry insight from the former football agent John Smith, who's represented some of the world's biggest and best players, including
the second leg of their Europa League semi-final here tomorrow.
Right, let's get a look at the weather. And we've been seeing blue skies whenever we've talked to our reporters right around the country, Thomas.
Yeah, we certainly got the weather right today. We were promising a spectacular day, and it's been stunning out there. Now, I'm not so sure we're going to get the forecast absolutely spot on in the next couple of days or so. We're expecting some thunderstorms, which will be quite hit and miss, so not everybody's going to get them. That's very difficult to forecast. But today's been easy. It's just sunny pretty much all round, apart from northern parts of Scotland. But here's the headlines coming for the next 24 hours, so that humidity is increasing. There'll be some energy in the atmosphere to develop clouds and possibly some thunderstorms as well. And actually, through the early hours of Thursday morning, the humidity and the clouds will be increasing across some southern areas, and already we might get some showers. Not particularly cold tonight, so that humidity, that warmth is coming in from the south. And really, through tomorrow morning onwards into the afternoon, we'll just keep on seeing those clouds increasing and increasing across the south until we get 1 or 2 thunderstorms. But there probably won't be too many of them. If you catch one, it probably will be quite a downpour. But warm and sunny otherwise in other areas, particularly a little bit further north, 20 there across Yorkshire, still 17 in Belfast and Glasgow. And then Friday and the weekend, still a chance of some thunderstorms, probably turning a bit fresher by the time we get to Sunday.
Hello again, you're watching BBC News at 5. It's exactly past. Our latest headlines. President Trump has defended his decision to sack the head of the FBI without warning. He says that James Comey had lost the confidence of almost everyone in Washington.
Why did you fire Director Comey?
Because he wasn't doing a good job, very simply. He was not doing a good job.
Here, the family of Eva Janet, the 11-year-old girl who died at a theme park yesterday, say their world has been torn apart. The Crown Prosecution Service says no Conservatives will face charges over claims they had breached the rules on campaign spending during the last general election. All the very latest sports news now. Let's go to the BBC Sports Centre and join Hugh Ferris. Hiya.
Hello to you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. 2 years ago, it was the group of death that put pay to England's chances at the Rugby World Cup in 2 years' time. Looks like it might not be any easier. Eddie Jones has joked he'll have to visit a Japanese temple to pray before taking on both France and Argentina in their pool. We'll hear from our reporter Chris Jones on today's draw for the 2019 tournament in a moment. But first, his namesake, Eddie.
Well, we want to win the World Cup. It's quite clear we want to come here and win the World Cup. What a great experience it would be winning the World Cup in Japan. The first time a Rugby World Cup's played outside a traditional country, so we'll prepare well for that, and every day till the World Cup we'll prepare to get better.
Eddie Jones says it's not a tough group, it's a good group. He's embracing the challenge. He feels these games against France and Argentina in the pool stages will be the ideal preparation for the greater challenges come the quarterfinals and potentially beyond. But you could forgive some England fans having a little bit of trepidation at the moment, given the fate that befell England at the World Cup in 2015. Right across the pool stages, there are some mouth-watering clashes. Pool A, Scotland and Ireland drawn together. They'll both fancy their chances of getting out of the group, but the big motive is to finish top of that pool and avoid the New Zealand All Blacks in the quarter-final. New Zealand have South Africa in Pool B, and you'd back the All Blacks to top that pool. As for Wales, head coach Warren Gatland has declared himself relieved to have avoided the pool of death like they had back in 2015, but still they have their arch nemesis Australia, a team they just aren't able to beat at the moment, as well as the up-and-comers Georgia. And if Wales and England are both to get out of their pools, there could be a quarter-final meeting between the two sides. Wouldn't that be something?
So England will play Argentina in 2019. They are this summer as well, and their 2 test matches will be shown live on the BBC, so mark your card for the Saturdays of June the 10th and the 17th. Arsenal can move to within 3 points of the Premier League top 4 tonight with a win at Southampton. Still with 4 matches to play, Arsene Wenger's hoping to keep up his record of qualifying for the Champions League in every season he's been in charge.
The confidence is an important part of a success, but let's not forget we have 63 points. You know, we are not in as well. We have won games before, and but overall, I believe that. In the recent 5 games, we won 4, and so overall, I believe that we had a bad spell, but we recovered from it, and we have to show now that we can be consistent until the end of the season.
Alistair Cook has scored his 2nd century in just 3 matches in the Royal London One-Day Cup today. The England batsman is playing for his county Essex against Sussex at Chelmsford, where he was watching at the other end as an dramatic opening to the match unfolded. A hat-trick, no less. First to fall victim to Sussex's Jerome Taylor was Varun Chopra, who went for just 2. Next ball, it was Tom Westley who also went caught behind. Taylor wasn't done, though. A hat-trick was completed when Adam Wheater was sent on his way from the very next delivery. Things did improve for Essex, though, largely thanks to Cook, who went in the end for 109. Essex just finishing their 50 overs on 295 for 7. And finally, to a rather embarrassing moment at the Giro d'Italia for Slovenian cyclist Luka Pibernik. He was leading the 5th stage as it entered Messina on the island of Sicily. Unfortunately for him, he had either forgotten they were meant to do 2 laps through the town, or he didn't hear the bell indicating the final lap, and so celebrated his uncontested victory, only to realise moments later why the rest of the field hadn't chased him. Well, the Colombian sprinter Fernando Gaviria was eventually and legitimately first across the finish line for his 2nd victory of the Tour. Britain's Geraint Thomas and Adam Yates came home safely in the main group, remaining 2nd and 3rd overall behind the leader Bob Jungels of Luxembourg. Sure, we've all done it. That's all the sport for now. Much more in Sports Day, Ben, coming up at 6:30.
All right, look forward to that, Hugh. Many thanks indeed. Let's take you back now to our top story, and that news that James Comey, the FBI director, has been fired in Washington. It's caused shockwaves in the United States, and it's led US Democrats and some Republicans, in fact, to intensify their calls for an independent investigation into alleged links between the Trump presidential election campaign and Russia. Richard Lister reports.
James Comey's impact on the American presidency has been profound. Democrats say he swung the election against Hillary Clinton. Trump supporters say he's undermined the White House. But the question hanging over his sacking is why now?
I made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
When, days before the election, the investigation into whether Mrs. Clinton had compromised national security by using a private email server was reopened by Mr. Comey, Donald Trump was thrilled.
It took guts for Director Comey to make the move that he made in light of the kind of opposition he had.
But then came this.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
But 7 months on, the Justice Department has suddenly decided Mr. Comey had no right to announce the case was closed. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, said in a memo, the FBI is unlikely to regain public and congressional trust until it has a director who understands the gravity of the mistakes and pledges never to repeat them. Democrats, though, think it's another announcement from Mr. Comey which got him sacked, that he was investigating possible Russian support for Donald Trump.
And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
Mr. Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn, was an early casualty, forced to resign after lying about his talks with Russian officials. But one senior Republican believes the Senate inquiry into the allegations could be jeopardized by the removal of Mr. Comey. Richard Burr said his dismissal further confuses an already difficult investigation by the committee.
If there ends up being nothing there, I'll be the first to acknowledge that. But boy, oh boy, with the president's actions, not just today, but his comments over the last few weeks, his whole approach towards our investigation really raises a huge level of concern with me.
But Donald Trump said this morning Comey lost the confidence of almost everyone in Washington, Republican and Democrat alike. When things calm down, they will be thanking me. But for many, this sacking will raise more questions than answers. Mr. Trump's ensured the controversy about his relations with Moscow will continue. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Well, we can speak now about this to the former CIA officer Evan McMullin, who also ran as an independent candidate in last year's US presidential election. Very good to have you on the programme. Thank you so much for being with us. So all sorts of allegations about why Donald Trump has fired his FBI director, talk of a cover-up. How do you see it?
Well, I think the New York Times is just reporting just a few hours ago that Comey sought additional resources to expand the investigation from the Department of Justice. and that was just a few days before he was sacked by President Trump. And so that's an additional detail that seems to suggest quite clearly, in fact, that Donald Trump wanted